Today we're going to be talking about our next project, which is Project 3. We are going to be creating a business card. So let's just go over what the project entails. The objective is the student will use the logo they have created in Project 2, which, by the way, I saw some really great designs. And, like I said before, this can be an ongoing project. So if you're not satisfied with the way it is, and after the critique, you can continue working on that. Like I said before, logos are one of the hardest things to design. So sometimes I've had students who have been working on them all the way to the end of the semester. So that's how long sometimes it takes. Okay, so you'll take the logo from Project 2 to design the new business card. The card will be a double-sided design. Students may use information on their card like your name, your title, phone number, email, website, social media pages, or QR codes. These are optional. Of course, you need some way that they are going to contact you, so at least an email or a phone number. But you can give yourself a title, whatever you want, graphic designer, creative genius. I have a friend who does that. You can get creative with your title if you want. Sometimes it's an icebreaker, or it just shows people that you have a sense of humor or something like that. So, can you make up for the sake of the design? Yes, you can make up a website. Or a QR code just to see what it would look like, and if in the future you'd like to use the card, then of course you would put the right information. The size is 2 by 3.5 is the standard business card size, but I said 2 or slightly shorter because sometimes I've seen some really thin business cards that sometimes the size itself makes it memorable. So I wouldn't go any larger, because sometimes people have compartments that they put the card in, and if it's something they can lose or it doesn't fit, sometimes that's not a good idea. So I think the width should stay 3.5, but you can play with the height a little bit. So the business cards must be branded around the logo, so keep that in mind. Any colors that you use in the logo, you might want to consider using in your business card design. Whether it is shapes or lines or anything, or your text. Students will learn about bleeds and crop marks. Those are very important. So today we're going to be using InDesign. I know it's a difficult program, and for those of you who are just used to something else, I know you guys did great with Illustrator, so I'm just going to show you the right programs to work with the right things for the right type of project. I just think it's a mistake to go ahead and design everything in Photoshop, but we'll talk about that later. Okay, so you will begin with thumbnail sketches. I always do that. Sometimes I can't just go straight to the computer, but everybody's different. But I really suggest that you sketch your ideas out first. Add meaningful color. We spoke a little bit about color. Use InDesign to create the front and the back, and you'll see why it's the proper program to work with, because we're going to go into detail on that. These are the specs. It's 3.5 by 2 inches, and the margin right here, the blue line, that is still your card, but that means that you don't want any text or important information in this area here, because you're risking it to be cut off. So when the cutter comes and cuts your card, it's gonna cut along the black line. So if you have some information in here, the cutter's not always perfect, so every time that it cuts, it might cut at a slight angle. And this is even any professional cutter is just gonna slightly cut a little bit more. Some are gonna be more than others. So you want to make sure you don't go in this area. So you want to allow at least a quarter of an inch, which is 0.25 inches. And then your bleed. This is if you don't want your design to have a margin. So, for instance, if you have a business card that that the image goes straight through the to the edge of the paper, that means it has a bleed. If it has a white border, it means it has no bleed. But if you see a business card that or any printed material that has the image, bleed off into the edge of the paper, then that means that it needs a bleed. So as graphic designers, we have to make sure that we design everything according to the way the printer is going to need it. Otherwise, graphic designers and printers don't get along if you're not doing things right, and you're going to experience that when you want things professionally printed. It's okay if you go to a copy shop and they can print a PDF for you, no problem. But once you want something professionally printed, maybe a mass production of 1,000 business cards or a thousand brochures that a company wants you to do, you have to make sure you set it up right. So I'm going to show you how to do that, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and look at some examples. I have here some business card examples, and for instance, you're gonna want to have, of course, like your phone number, your email address, but get creative with the design. Don't feel intimidated, like just because it's a small little card, you're not able to get creative. So I suggest that you continue to bring your aesthetics into your business card, and this is kind of a way to show off, like this is the first impression people get of you, so make sure that it's a lasting one. And you know like I always say, simple is the best, but get creative with typography, with your fonts, and just try things. I know some of you, it's really hard, but just keep on trying, and we're with practice you're gonna get better. So this is the one that I was talking about, it being a little bit shorter. This is very simple. So don't think that you have to fill up the whole space. For instance, on this one, all it is it's a solid color, and with the name, you could have your logo just on one side, and then all your information on the other side. So it could be very simple, but the way they treated the type and the way they isolated their name here, that's what makes it really stand out. So like I said, logo on one side, information on the other, that will be fine. So, but it's the way that you do it, the way that you approach your design, and how can you enhance your logo? How can you make it stand out even more now? Just another example, very simple. Maybe the back is just, promoting your website. And then get creative. If you have, some of you have really great ideas with the names themselves, so you want to continue enhancing that concept. You can use photography even. Don't just think that you have to use just text and shapes and things like that. You can get really creative. Another example of just playing with color and fonts. A lot of these are very typographically heavy, so I like simple, but you are allowed to play with photos or text or shapes. whatever you'd like. This one is, I just thought it was pretty clever that they had the element of the ruler there. And you can get really creative sometimes with the printing process. You know, sometimes you can get things printed on this, in this case, transparency. I'm not sure if it's plastic, but this is an example of somebody using a QR code, just in case. Sometimes I think the QR code is so ugly, but it's it's something new, and it just shows that you're, you know, that you're current. I have seen somebody use it. It was pretty clever. They had a picture of a hand, and they were promoting a watch. And inside of the watch, they had a QR code, and I scanned it just to see. And it took me to a video about their watches. It was like a music video commercial. It was pretty cool. So ever since then, I really like the idea, because you can take somebody to a video, to your website, or anything like that. I have never used one before, but if you guys want to use one, that's fine. And then I've seen some other ones where they'll even have an image in the QR code, which I thought was pretty cool. These are just more examples for you guys to see. You know, playing with typography, you want to go back and start playing with type, and this time using words that pertain to your industry, if that's another idea. Or, you know, elements that really enhance your industry. Like in our industry, it's communication. So what does communication look like? This one I thought was pretty clever. I mean, you don't have to go this far, but I thought I'd show it to you guys. And then it shows how you assemble the little chair. I thought this one was pretty clever too. It's for a film, I guess. No, it's a graphic designer. I thought it was a film designer. These are just inspiration for you guys. Like I said, it could be very simple. It's all about how you place things and using the negative space to your advantage. You know, sometimes we feel so tempted to fill up the whole space. It makes us uncomfortable. But sometimes the negative space is really what holds everything together. Okay, so those are some examples here. Now I'd like to first go to Illustrator. Oh, this is an example also I wanted to show you about how important it is to align things. So in this case, we see how in this business card, things are just kind of floating around everywhere, okay? And everything, like I've said before, everything seems to be relatively the same size. There's no scale factor here. But then when you align things, left align, right align, and then middle align, then you kind of create, like us as graphic designers, we create these lines that nobody else can see, these guides. So it's important that you align things that way they feel like they're anchored onto the page or the card. Okay. Okay, so let's say that this is my logo that I'm gonna use for my business card. Okay, so the first thing I do, once I've decided this is my logo, I'm not gonna change it. It got revised, it got reviewed, everybody loved it, and I'm gonna go with this. First thing I do is I create outlines of my text, because last thing I want to do is give my file over to the client or my employer, and the fonts go crazy, you know, because if they don't have the fonts I used, then then it's not going to work. It's going to default to something horrendous probably, you know. So the first thing I do is I make sure that that all my text is created into outlines. So I go to this one is still not outlined, so I can modify it if I want to add a word, a letter, or something like that. So what I want to do is make sure that that is go to type and create outlines, and now it's no longer text, it's a shape. Okay, so so now I save it, right? Now I have my logo, and now we're ready to go to InDesign. Okay, so InDesign, what it's gonna look like. Okay, um, now the thing that I wanted to show you is that when we go to create new, we go to document. Automatically, when you're working on InDesign for the first time or at school, it's going to always default to points or picas here. So we don't really know what with the dimensions I've given you and with the printers, we always use 8.5. We use inches here. So I like to change that as soon as I can. So I mean, one way that you can automatically know that it's, let's say, 3.5 by 2 is right here in page size. We all know that letter is 8.5 by 11. But you also have a US business card size, which is going to change it to 3.5 by 2. And you can choose whether you want which orientation, portrait or landscape. But sometimes you might get a project that's not under here. It's not letter or letter half or legal, or, you know, it's going to be something very specific. So in order to do that, we say cancel. We go to InDesign and preferences. And we either just go to general or units and increments. I mean, once you're there, you're going to see that same list, units and increments. We want to make sure where it says horizontal and vertical, right now it's picas. We want to make sure it says inches. So we change that to inches and we say OK. Now we say document. Now it says 8.5 by 11 because it's letter. We go and we say US business card. That's going to change it to 3.5 by 2. Okay, so if you have here where it says more options, we're going to want to click on that because we're going to set up our bleed marks and all of that kind of stuff that we talked about earlier. Okay, so margins right now is 0.5, which is half of an inch. We don't want 0.5, we just want a quarter. Otherwise, that's a really thick margin. It's not going to allow us to, you know, work with our design, and since our card is very small. So we want to make sure it says 0.25, and once you hit 0.25, if you hit tab, it will automatically, this chain means that it will make everything the same size. Okay, so you don't have to go in and say 0.25, 0.25. Okay, now the bleed marks, remember we said it is 0.125. So again, once I finish, I hit tab and it will create, because you need it for all the sides. It's not just adding bleed to the left side, it's adding around the whole card. Okay, so once we've done that, we know that we've set up our card correctly. Then we say OK. Oh, I forgot one thing. Facing pages, unclick that. Otherwise, I have to do that. You'll see why. Because facing pages is only for, let's say if you're working on like a magazine or a book that it has 2 pages that face each other. But it's a business card, so you don't really need that. Okay, so here we have, this is where we don't want the text to come out in, and this is if we're using anything, let's say, that's going to bleed out of the page. We don't want margins. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to bring my logo in. So there are two ways to bring your logo in. There's this little rectangular frame tool, which if you click and drag, you create a square, and then you go to File and Place, and we should locate our logo. So I had that on my desktop, so I'll just say Open. And here is my logo. Now, if something's too big or you want to make it smaller, you hold down Shift and Command, or Control, I believe, if it's a PC. Hold them both down and then click on the corner here, and you can make that smaller. Now, you might be saying to yourself, my logo looks horrendous. What happened? Nothing happened. InDesign does that. It previews it like that because it's like a fast preview. If it showed it at high resolution, it's made to have so many pages like a book, so it can create big files, so it kind of gives you an idea. But if it makes you feel better, hit Shift W, hold down Shift and then hit W, and you can see a much better, you will feel a lot better once you see it that way. Then hit Escape. Okay, so this is one way to bring in your logo. This is another way. You go back to Illustrator and you select it. You can say copy, in Apple it's Command C or Control C, and then you go back to InDesign. Now, one thing I want to show you, if you have your swatches out, just to show you what happens. And then you do a paste. Let's say Edit, Paste, Control V. It brings in the logo, and another thing it does, it brings in the swatches, the colors that I used. So I like this better because it actually, in InDesign, let's say if I wanted to do something, I can actually continue to manipulate it, or let's say change the color if I wanted to. Whereas here, I can't. It's brought in like an image. Okay, this only works with vector. Don't think that you can do that with just any photo or image like that. It has to be vector. So I prefer it this way. It brings in the colors. That way I can use my colors according to however it is that I want. So for instance, so to make it smaller, remember Command Shift or Control Shift, hold down the two keys and make that smaller. And then you can start using your information. So in order to start typing, you don't just start typing, you have to create a box. So you see where the type tool is, you click on that, and then you make a box. And every time you're in a tool, your dashboard changes too. So now I have all my type sizes and fonts that I can use. So I will put my name. My name. I was going to type my name, but I'll decide to type my real name. Okay. Okay, so here I can choose what font I want. And I'm going to use one of the colors from my um, I'm going to want to, you can choose, let's say, black and a tint of black that will make it gray. So I'm going to use the 50% to make it gray. And then I'm going to align to the right. And so this is where you do not want to be putting your information in this area here, okay? And this is where you don't want to be, that's not what you want to be doing. So everything within that pink little margin that we have there, okay? And so the bleed, the way it works is, let's say you want to create a shape under here. I want to make sure that it all comes, see right here it's telling me that it's a line that's black and there's no fill. So if I swap that, it creates the fill that's black and there's no line. But I would like a color, and I would like to have maybe text box that says, well, the trend now with the websites, they don't use www anymore. They just use the address, web address.com, and change that to, and I'm gonna make it white. And so if, let's say for instance, you want to add space between the letters, the kerning, you're gonna do that here, kerning tracking, the tracking here, the space between the letters. So let's say I'm just gonna give a ridiculous 200. Okay, so Shift W, and that's what my business card is looking like. Okay, so and so see how I had to, if I want this to bleed out of, this is my actual card. Most times when I see my students, they design like this because they know that that's the actual card, which is fine. It looks fine to me and you, but when we're getting ready to print it, and now I'm not talking about Xerox printing because you can do whatever you want with Xerox printer. But when I'm talking about mass producing and taking it to a printer, a professional printer, when you want something printed professionally, you have to add bleeds. So that's, it needs to go at least to 1/8. It could go beyond if you wanted to, but it has to go at least to 1/8 of an inch. So if you're using photos that you want to bleed or something like that, you have to make it stretch out of your canvas size. So if you create, let's say, an intricate background in Photoshop, you still have to keep in mind that it needs to be slightly bigger. So those things are going to get cut off. Okay, so now that I've designed the front. Now you have here on pages, just like in Photoshop, you can create, you click on this, it's a new, create new page. You click on that and you have your back. So if you click on this one, double click it, you go back and you go here. This is, so double click this. I'm gonna grab my logo again, copy, and I'm gonna go to the back, paste, and this time I'm going to create the whole back to be solid. And I'm going to choose my swatches. I'm going to choose this one. And I'm going to say layout. No, object. arrange front to back. So here I would like, let's say for instance, this to be white. Well, let's just say I did it like that. I've just made this whole thing really confusing for you guys probably. And these lines inside, which I can't even see, I wanted them to be that color. I know it's not making any sense to you guys, but just let me do this. I should have done it in Illustrator, but like created one that's for a dark background and then created one that was for a white background. There sometimes people have logos like that. They'll have them like what it looks like on a black background or something like that. So I'm just gonna say this is my back. So back and front. And that's basically all I need you guys to do. But we're not done yet. Okay, so now when you're getting ready to save this, you go to File, Export. I'm going to save it to my desktop. And I'm going to say Adobe a PDF print. There's interactive, and that's more for web. If you're creating, let's say, a brochure that has links online, that's what you would use that for, but we want this for print. So we say print and say save. And we're going to say all pages because that's going to allow us to bring in the front and the back. And see, that's the thing, that if you use Photoshop, you have to create two files. You have to create a front and then you have to create a back. And here you can have multiple files and they're all there. Sometimes what I do is I create different pages. If this is like where I'm beginning, and then I'll create one, and I like to keep that one, but I want to see how it would look if I do this, and so at the end I clean it all out and I just end up with one. So it's better to have both the front and the back in one file, whereas in I know you can do this also in Illustrator, but it's a lot easier in InDesign. So and I'm not saying that you can't, but I'm showing you this way. Now I've had instances in the past where things should have been done in InDesign. Like there were a series of flyers. There were like 5 or 7 flyers. They could have just been in one file, but instead somebody made 6 or 7 different files in Illustrator. So I came into this position and they asked me to look for them. And in order for me to find them, it took me like about a week in their file system because it's an old institution. It's a newspaper, so I couldn't find them. And if the designer would have made them all in InDesign and just had one file for a series of 7, then it would have made so much more sense. Okay, so that's why sometimes for some things you just have to know which program goes with what, you know. Okay, so we have general, we want all, we want the front and the back. And then we go next to marks and bleeds. We just want to click on crop marks and page information and use document bleed settings. That's going to use the settings that we created in the beginning, which is 0.125. And you say export. Okay? So that will create a file that is going to have, let me